Investors are obviously bracing for this week's Fed meeting. Will the Fed decide to cut rates or remain patient? Joining us right now to talk about this topic and much more is David Rubenstein. He's Carlyle Group's co-founder and co-executive chairman. And David, it's great to have you here.
My pleasure to be here.
You are an expert on the markets, on reading the markets and trying to figure out where they're headed next, because it's so important for private equity to always know what the potential exit strategy is going to be. So where would you say markets stand right now? And with all of this talk from the central banks around the globe, there's going to be more money sloshing around. What does that mean?
Many people in the market are worried about whether the growth period we've had for 10 years can continue for as long as people would like it to continue, which is surely for a couple more years. We've had a very long growth cycle, record growth cycle. Many people are worried about the trade wars we're going on in China and maybe Mexico and Canada. We haven't resolved that agreement yet either. I think the markets would like to see the trade agreement with China resolved at some point, the USMCA ratified by Congress at some point, and also to see probably some cut in interest rates at some point. I think also the market very much wants to see the debt limit increased and the budget deal arrived at before the end of the fiscal year, at the end of September. If all those things could happen, the economy is going to be in pretty good shape. But if some of those do not happen, I think the economy next year could be more troubled.
Let's just talk about the Fed itself, because I think that may be the most important factor the markets have been watching for so long. Would you agree with that?
Yes, the Fed has become more important than ever because the fiscal ability of the Congress to do things is very limited. It used to be you had monetary policy and fiscal policy. There just isn't much more you can do in terms of cutting taxes and increasing spending because of the debt limit. The debt is so high right now. So therefore, it really goes to the monetary policy. And monetary policy has been frozen for a few months because we're not certain whether the Fed wants to cut interest rates. I think the market now believes, and I believe, at some point you'll get a cut this year. I'd be surprised if it happened today. I think the markets don't anticipate that. If the market today were to learn that the interest rates were going to be cut, I think that would be a gigantic shock for the market.
I mean, with interest rates already so low, though, what do you think about where equity prices stand right now?
Well, equity prices are pretty high, and that's one of the problems we have in our private equity world. Because prices are very, very high, we have to pay 13, 14 times cash flow to buy companies as opposed to 7, 8, or 9 times. Clearly, returns have come down a bit because of that. But I think the biggest thing that people are worried about right now is whether the government of the United States can actually solve some of these problems. For example, the trade war with China. That has been on hold for a while in terms of resolution. I do think the president will meet with Xi Jinping at the G20 summit, and I do think there will be a resolution before the end of the year. There are many different issues to be resolved. The biggest one is our trying to get the Chinese to restructure their economy and restructure the way they operate. I think that is the more difficult issue. I think the Chinese will agree to buy more American products, and I think that is the easiest thing to resolve. Then there's the other issue about the market access. That is a little more challenging, but I think the Chinese will agree to have more market access. They're most resistant, though, in letting us tell them how to restructure their economy.
So are you making any bets as an investor related to China, either based on your own businesses that you currently own or other ones that you want to own, as a function of that assessment?
Well, I go to China a fair bit, and I talk to the government officials there, and I obviously talk to government officials here. My view is that both sides want a deal. Now, so I often analogize, the pandas often want to reproduce, but they don't often know how to do it. They fumble from time to time because you just, you need both sides to make this work. I think the American government now really wants a deal. I think the president doesn't want to give his hand away too much, but I think the American government wants a deal.
I think they're so cute.
The end of the year.
They feel uncomfortable, like, engaging in such a dirty, I don't, the pandas. I think they just are uncomfortable in that, trying to, and they do grope around and not really.
They only have a 4-hour period of 1 day a year to really be able to do this, so they're very
And that would be different how from the rest of us? No, I'm kidding. Hey, can I ask you, recently?
Yes.
The rhetoric totally has gotten ramped up to inspire really a populist approach to the United States in China. You've seen the rhetoric, haven't you? That's not normal. That doesn't look like a country that's ready to make a deal, does it?
Well, rhetoric is one thing, and then getting a deal is another thing. The rhetoric in our country is often not as good as
Why would you fire up the population if you weren't looking for at a protracted?
Well, because if you get people excited and then you come up with a deal, you can say, look, this big problem that existed, I just solved it. This is not something that's uncommon in the United States either. We say there's a big problem, and I'm going to solve it, and then when you solve it, you get credit for it. I think that both sides recognize there is a need for a deal. I think the Chinese economy is slipping more than people would like to admit. And the U.S. economy, while it's in pretty good shape, I don't think it can go forever without a trade deal with China and without USMCA being ratified.
So no chance that the Chinese refuse to meet, or President Xi refuses to meet with President Trump
I would be surprised if there is not a meeting of some type. I would be surprised. Whether it produces a resolution, I would also be surprised. I think it will take a while, but before the end of the year, before the campaign season officially starts next year, I think there will be a deal.
How much more room, then, does the market have to run, both in the public markets and, therefore, by the way, the private markets, if we get a deal? Because we are going to move into a campaign election year, which may throw everything into question all over again.
If we were to run the table, get all the things I talked about, a budget deal, a debt limit deal, a China deal, a U.S., Canada, Mexico deal, that's running the table in my view, and I think the U.S. and the interest rates probably go down a little bit. Yeah. I think the economy is going to be very strong for another year or two. Remember, presidents get reelected when the economy is generally good. Presidents don't get reelected when you're in a recession. Ford, Carter, George Herbert Walker Bush. So I think the president recognizes if the economy is pretty good, and it will be good if all those things happen that I mentioned, he has a pretty good chance of getting reelected.
David, very quickly, I know you said as a private equity guy, you don't like it when prices are high. It's hard to buy companies. But at the same time, what do you think of the IPO market, some of the hot IPOs we've seen? Because, again, you need an extra exit strategy, too.
IPOs are less significant than they used to be for people like our firm. We tend to sell things to other private equity firms or to strategics. IPO market's important, but it's not as important as it once was. Remember, in 1997, there were 7,200 public companies. Now there are only 3,600. And so it's not as important as it used to be as a way to exit.
I can't believe how bullish you are on getting a deal. Are you talking your book? I mean, it means a lot to...
He talks to both sides, though.
I know, but it means a lot to Carlyle.
As an American, I think it's...
Well, I am too, but I just thought things have really gotten worse in the last... hold on, relax.
Remember, it looked at times like there wouldn't be a deal with Canada and Mexico. Remember that? And a deal did get done. It hasn't been
totally
ratified
different.
by Congress.
We're in a Cold War all of a sudden with China about so many different things. We weren't worried Mexico was going to take over the world by 2025.
In my view, both sides need a deal and want a deal, and I think the rhetoric has to be discounted somewhat, and I do think a deal will get done by the end of the year. Now, the Chinese were not able to deliver on what they initially negotiated. The negotiations occurred, and in the end, when they went back to the senior officials
that would
in
happen.
China,
They couldn't pass the laws that we needed passed.
Well, the Chinese, when they negotiated something, the administration said they reneged on it. What the Chinese did is they couldn't sell to the most senior officials in China what had been negotiated.
Right.
So they had to take some of it off the table. But that doesn't mean that a deal won't get done. It just won't be as comprehensive as it once was.
How does President Trump say, here's a lesser deal and we're okay with that then?
I think President Trump's ability to sell a deal is pretty good if he wants to do so. So I don't think everybody knows all the details of what was being discussed. But if a deal gets done, even if it's not 100% of what we once wanted, it's still probably a pretty good deal.
You're handicapping that they are going to run, that all of these issues, talking about running the table, are going to happen.
I think if all of them happen, it will be great.
No, I appreciate that, but if you're handicapping whether they all will happen.
I think by the end of the year is a pretty good chance. I don't think the debt limit will not get passed. I don't think that there will be a failure of the government to come up with a budget deal. I don't think we'll have a government shutdown again. USMCA is more complicated because the Democrats may not want to give President Trump a victory. The China trade deal doesn't have to be approved by Congress.